Welcome to the Lucent Perspective. I'm your host, Rebecca Hastings. I've spent over a decade working with executives in the tech sector and helped successful companies build their leadership teams and scale. During my career, I've been lucky to have the privilege of learning from many exceptional leaders. In these conversations, you'll get perspectives from peers, be inspired, and learn what it takes to become one of the best. This is your chance to listen to experts talking about the challenges, solutions, and the vital insights they've gained in their careers to date. And I'm joined today by Duncan Hart. Duncan is the co-founder and CEO of DeepMiner, a deep tech company who are doing some really innovative stuff in the public sector and beyond, helping to really leverage data and expand horizons around that. So, Duncan, I thought that it would be really interesting to find out a bit more about you. Specifically, your career is pretty intriguing because you've taken an unusual path to becoming the CEO of a tech company. You have worked in the maritime sector and oil and gas before moving into tech. So it'd be great if you could just tell me a little bit about how you came to be in the tech startup ecosystem.
Well, yes, it's a good one. So I started out, I graduated as an engineer and went into the originally yacht building industry and did a time wandering around yachts, boatyards, sailing, and then moved to super yachts and ended up in commercial shipbuilding in various companies dealing with that, and spent 6 years living out in France. I got to work on Queen Mary 2. And so did everything around that. And it was absolutely brilliant, fantastic, interesting industry, really rapidly changing and innovating. And the moment when you can go and work in a shipyard in France, where they've completely adopted the Toyota lean production system for a shipyard, we really see some incredible innovation going on. And that was very exciting as an industry. I always had a desire to do an MBA. I had my undergraduate degree and I wanted to do an MBA because my career had never actually given me any formal training through my roles. I just learned as I went. And I had this sort of itch to scratch, which was an MBA. And so when I came back to the UK, I took a startup role as a contract MD to build a startup for a company. So we built a factory and employed people and got customers and exited from that. Back in 2008, I refinanced the business through the financial crash, even though I had no shareholdings in it. That was a story in itself. It involved a presentation to Middle Eastern investors in an Indian restaurant in an English vineyard, which is brilliant fun. And I then went to did an MBA, and that was my first touch on data and data-driven decision-making. Because the first day we were in there, one of the senior lecturers, I remember it to this day, stood up and presented to us, and he said the whole of the 2008 financial crash was completely predictable. It was all there.
Fascinating.
Yeah. All the data was there that said this crash was happening. He said everybody chose to ignore the data, and decisions are based on hubris, gut instincts. He said in a male-dominated industry, and this sort of yes culture that existed, and to a certain extent, certain industries now still have a yes culture. Everybody just reinforced what the top people said, and nobody dared, counter them, and nobody looked at data. And he said it was absolutely coming. So what they'd done in that period before I'd started is rejig the whole of their MBA to be data-driven. So we went through all of our modules using data to make decisions. And what does the data say? And what does this say? And we had plenty of very frank discussions around, well, I've been, people say, well, we do this with our staff and that's with our staff. And they'd say, well, yes, but the data shows X, Y, and Z, and the high-performing companies do this. So that was a bit of a really mind opener. So I came out of that very determined to use data somehow. And I bizarrely applied for a job for an oil and gas company with a guy called Jordan, who to this day we're still friends, and he's an absolutely great person. And he took a risk on this madman who came in and said, we should use more data to make this business work. And so he employed me. Sure, he regrets it. And we then went about this business that we had, we were trying to change, and we started putting data-driven decision making. And we saw, even if I'm honest, I wasn't expecting the changes in performance that we got. And they were significant. We really saw some changes in performance. It enabled us to win contracts against the flow. We were the highest cost operator, and we still won another 4-year extension. And really, I just carried that through in a couple of various other roles that we were involved in. And it became a point where I always had this interest in data, and I kept reading around it and kept looking. And then suddenly I started reading about this thing called artificial intelligence, this thing that computers could do it for me. And I didn't need to put people on it to try and figure it all out. And I saw an opportunity to go and work for an advert for the Data Lab, being led by the brilliant Gillian Doherty. And I just thought, I'm going to do that. That looks really, really fascinating. I think I can learn a lot. I can learn a lot of her, and I can learn a lot in artificial intelligence. So around that time, the oil and gas downturn came. So it was a perfect moment to leave the industry and try something new. So I just jumped and went into the Data Lab, and it was brilliant, fantastic. I learned so much about artificial intelligence and about building data science. But one of the things I felt is it was brilliant to look at it from a technical point of view. And I suppose it leads to why ultimately we ended up where we were and why I ended up doing this business. Is I always felt in early days, there was lots of developing solutions for problems that maybe people didn't have.
Yeah.
And for me, the use of data is always about solving my business problem. Yeah.
It's a great discipline there to actually have a problem to solve that is a real problem.
And not just create a solution for something that you think. So to give you an example, that we had a contract that we were looking at, we had to win the contract. We had a set number of KPIs. So actually everyone was doing the usual technical sell. Well, we've got these machines and we've got that, and there's lots of technical stuff around it. We actually said, well, what are the KPIs? Because actually to win this, we needed to demonstrate we'd met the KPIs, and what were we going to do to make ourselves better? So we took all the technical data and the data we had, at the time it was manual, and answered those KPIs using data, because they were irrefutable. Nobody could say it wasn't the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's fundamental. That was the initial thinking behind DeepMiner, is how can I solve problems for businesses? We're very much B2B, not B2C. How can we solve business problems using data? That's the fundamentals. And that's why it sort of led me to where we set up the business, originally off a Tech Challenge.
So that's really interesting. So having also worked in France in yachting many years ago, you start there with what is a super slick industry where quality is totally paramount, and there's a lot of science goes into building a yacht.
A lot of data, yeah.
A lot of data.
Yeah.
But then it feels like there's been a lot of curiosity, a lot of learning that's taken you to where you are. And one of the things that really resonated with me was when you were talking about the financial crash and how that influenced the course. I think a lot of leadership courses, they get you to challenge your the underlying attitudes and beliefs that you have around making decisions. But then when you go into the real world, it's actually very hard to do that in practice and not be yourself, especially when you're told you must be an authentic leader. You have no time sometimes to make a decision. You have to go on your gut. But actually that discipline of looking at data and being data first sometimes is
But
really valuable for getting rid of your bias.
I'm going to slightly, I think as a modern manager, I don't think having no time to make a decision, you've got to go with your gut's a bit too much of an easy excuse, really, isn't it? I think,
yeah,
I think there's a big difference. If you have the data available or you don't, fine. However, as a manager, why don't you have the data available? And
exactly.
You know, as a leader, when we did ours, I've given lots of leadership examples. Okay, and you could say, well, here's all the successes. You can list them off. It's very easy. But one of the clear things was said to me is that yes, but there is, and people will say, oh, there's an element of luck. Yes, that's fine. But when they actually go through the data and look at performance over time, it's not the high, it's the balanced risks that are taken. So when we were talking a bit earlier about venture capitalists, they want you to have all the data so they can see, make a balanced decision. But then you turn around and say, well, I'm going to wing it as a leader. That it's a bit of a weird one. There are always elements where you, in the end, the data can't answer everything. There'll be a moment where you have to make a decision as a leader. But at least you're making that as an informed decision. So, you know, we do that with our products all of the time. You know, we reached a point one time where we'd hit 80% accuracy on a piece of one of our very first models, natural language processing. The team knew they could hit 95% accuracy. They knew it. However, the timescale for that was another 6 months. I had the deployment to get out, so I had to make a decision to go with 80%.
Yeah.
Because I had a deployment to make. But then what we said to the customers that we're working on this still, and we're going to go to the 95%, and we'll give you that, which would be better. But let's go with this one to start with. And that's the fast fail thing, is like, let's get this out, get it moving, and work around that. And again, that fast fail thing comes back from get it out, get feedback, get data, make a decision based on what they're saying to you. Now, the customer isn't always right. The data isn't always right. But as long as you're looking at it, I think that's right. Gut decisions, it's a hard one. I'm not going to say I'm not going to say I don't make gut decisions, but there's always a data at the back of my head. I've always thought about the analysis on it.
And that's true. The startups I've worked with that have been really successful have been, you know, like relatively data driven, even if they're not focusing purely on the data when they're making a decision. And the decision maker knows the trends, the patterns. And if they don't know the real-time data or how to have access to that, they know something, you know, on a weekly cadence as a minimum that's being reported.
I think as a startup in the early days, it's very hard to have the data because you're dealing in unknowns, which is, I think, where the gut thing does come in startup world. You know, we pivoted, we knew we could do it, we knew we could execute it, but we still pivoted into a bit of an unknown. And we didn't have, it was a scary thing to do because I didn't have any data, but there was an element of gut because I knew the data I had was that our tech could answer the question that was being posed. We knew technically that we could do it. That was not a problem. The key actually variable in all of that was the customer and the growth from that. Does the market want it? We did a bit of due diligence beforehand, which we had to do anyway as part of the application process. We looked around in the market and we could see a niche. We could see a niche in that market. We could see a hole that was there that needed to be filled. And so that's what we tried to dive into as a product market fit, is fill that niche in there.
So, Duncan, tell me a bit more about DeepMiner and what you do. You've touched on some of the things you've been through. I can't wait to explore them more. But it would be good if you could just tell us a bit more, because to some people, they might not know what deep tech really is and what it is you're providing. So it'd be great to understand more about that.
So there's probably a million things for deep tech. So we enjoy pushing boundaries with tech, with in particular with regards to artificial intelligence and advanced database technology. So what typically happens with most data sources? So as you all know, lots of data sits in silos around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of organizations have some really great vertical data solutions. And there's some really great products out there. Actually, if you are a large organization and trying to make a decision, whether you're public or private sector, you are trying to, in reality, make decisions across data sets. Because no piece of data lives in isolation. Every single piece of data is linked to each other somehow. And if you want to look at a great example of that is look at the rise of Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Meta, Insta, to the huge corporates that they are now. They look at the world of data as being linked. So before we even knew each other, we were linked somehow by people we knew, places we'd been, events we've been to, even if it's just topics we're interested in. Everything is effectively linked. Now, that actually makes sense. So that's what DeepMiner look at the world as. So we look at the world as linked. And actually it makes sense because when we look at the business problem of what we're trying to solve and what we're trying to do, as human beings, we try to make naturally links between things and patterns between things. Now, computer technology in the traditional sense is really ledgers like a bookkeeping, columns and rows, and it tries to make explicit links between things, which gets very complicated very, very quickly. So as a human being trying to solve a problem, we then took a computer solution and we struggle to make the link between the two because we don't think like computers, we think like human beings. And we think of the world as a big network. We join things, we'll sit down, first time we met, you say, oh, this, I go, oh, yes, I know that. And, oh, yeah. And that's all just those sort of little links that fly around. And so that's what DeepMiner have been working on for 5 years. And we pivoted deeply into it with our current customer base and the contracts that fingers crossed we're about to sign, which is around linking up multiple data sets, large numbers of data sets, to give you, a user, a solution, a department, a solution, an organization, a solution. Because the whole concept of one size fits all is great. But actually, one size does not fit all, because what you're trying to solve in your job right now is this. What your department's trying to solve is this. And what the whole company is trying to solve, or the region, whatever, is this. And all of those are slightly different. All of those need all of the data from multiple different places. And each one is going to look at those pieces of data slightly differently. So that's what we're trying to, or what we believe we have developed, is a version that allows you, from a humanistic point of view, analyze large amounts of data across multiple silos. You don't need to replace anything. And you can extract that all the data out. You can see the relationship that exists, even if that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hops away tenuously. It doesn't matter the formats. It could be Excel, it could be Word documents, it could be PDF, emails, because our NLP models have been trained using the very, very latest NLP modeling to read like human beings and understand context of words. Mm-hmm. So we always use the one, I'm going to the bank, I'm on the fishing bank, and I wouldn't bank on that. Bank is 3 different contexts there. We're interested in, I'm going to the bank. Well, we may be interested that you're going to the fishing bank because you're going somewhere. And it's understanding those different contexts, which is actually allows you to do so much more with the natural language processing. And then you get into generation. So that's what we've done. And that's what we've been building and pivoted heavily into. It's quite a long
That's fascinating. Sorry. And that's fascinating, Duncan. You talk with like such a big picture view. It would be good to understand like what's driving you and DeepMiner. What is the purpose behind all of that?
Well, it's interesting. So for one of our we touched on it once already, and we'll come back to it. We've used our technology on a CivTech challenge. We're currently in two, actually, CivTech challenges. And the first one we answered was one called 5.3, which is using data to help support businesses in Scotland with the business support agencies. Mm-hmm. And is how do they use all of their data to support businesses like us? And so when we looked at that challenge, we got very excited because it's what we like doing. It's big picture, but granular execution. And it fitted our technology perfectly, because if we can help these agencies support businesses better, we get supported better. And part of that comes about, and part of my passion comes around that, is if we can use data to support an economy, if we could use data to support businesses, and those businesses get better support, we raise everybody up. And this is my other passion, is if we can raise everybody up as a business community, we create more jobs, we create more value, and then we potentially get more customers, or just eventually the whole economy works up, and that's a more vibrant economy is better for us, because we get to spark off other companies, or we get to meet other people. But likewise, we're working in an economy that's vibrant and growing. And that's sort of a personal passion of mine. And I know the team share that as well, that sort of vision of excitement around making a difference. We really feel we can make a difference. And likewise for businesses, we're deeply passionate about data. We love data. And if we can help our customers get insights and make a difference to their business, where's the lose? We love doing this. Mm-hmm. We love the data. We love helping make decisions. People make decisions. We find it fascinating. We love getting to know that data and helping them solve their problems. And so I think as a business as well, we find that I love businesses. I love learning about businesses. I love learning about their problems. And I love the fact that we may have a solution that may help them somewhere in their business,
So really helping to leverage data to create a virtuous circle that will, not just enrich the economy, but ultimately enrich society, better jobs created, more opportunities. Yeah. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's good to hear such a clear purpose.
Yeah. And we're going through tough times as businesses at the moment. So the better we can have knowledge of data to help us support businesses, the better that is. I'm not just saying this because it's CivTech, but it's great that they're so vested in these sort of technologies, because it's such a great opportunity,
Yeah, the whole tech sector has so much potential to contribute. I think we've really just scratched the surface of what we can achieve as a collective group of companies and people.
Agreed. We only need to look at the pandemic and see all of those businesses in the hospitality retail sector. It was a business owner. It's awful. It was tough for us, the pandemic. We had a really tough time. I'm not going to deny that. It was some pretty down moments in it. But I wasn't in the retail sector, which good grief. And then I've got family members who have a pub and they had to shut. But actually, funnily enough, some of the tech, the fact that these apps came out that you're able to order from the bar, when we finally were able to go out, the adoption of mobile, you could pay with your card now, but the arrival of those little terminals that people can load on their phones to enable payments, it's disrupted the traditional expensive. I remember when I set that up in 2008, the business, I had to pay a fortune for a terminal, and we paid a fortune in fees for that terminal, to accept credit card payments. And then it was like I remember having the Rolly thing as well as a backup. And now, the arrival of no code in the terms of being able to develop your website so quickly. I know Amazon comes in for a lot of criticism, but the fact that you can go to Amazon as a small business and sell your company on there, it can cut through so much of industry,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not, it can be expensive, 100% it could be expensive, but there are lots of sort of low cost manners that you could impact your business. And I think that's what's exciting about tech as well. All these great new companies, these no coders coming out, you keep Wix. I built our first website on Wix. I've never built a website in my life. And I went to Wix. There's no fully other products are available. But I was able to design a website. I'm not that. There's brilliant designers out there. But the concept is a small business with zero budget could do that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very empowering.
Yeah.
So, like you touched on difficult times there, and I understand you had to do a pivot. So a lot of people are constantly pivoting, but you went about yours slightly differently. It'd be good to hear how that came about and how you made that decision.
Yeah. So, in the depths of the pandemic, we had some work on, and we were having a meeting, and one of the team members just literally, I think, pitched up and randomly said, I don't think we're going the right way with the tech we're using. And we said, oh, okay, fair enough. What do you mean? And so we're looking at the future. Where's the future business come from? And we looked at what we're doing, and they made a presentation to us. I said, go on, come back. And they came back and made a presentation about where they thought our tech layer, what we should be doing. And it made total sense. It was, the person who did it is a very technical person. This is where our core skills really lie. And I was like, you're right, actually, what we are trying to do something that we are good at, but we're actually better over here. And as we were going through that and looking at that and how we dealt with that in terms of a rebuild of the product, we saw, for those who don't know, CivTech is a ScotGov tech accelerator, and they are there to promote technical solutions for Scottish government or Scottish public sector problems. And we saw that challenge come out, and I sort of pitched up to the team on on the Zoom call. I drew a little diagram on a piece of paper, on a virtual piece of paper, and said, I want us to do this. I think our tech can build this. This is their problem. Here's the solution. And it was a one-page drawing. And I think we can do this. And I think we can execute this. And it's well within our comfort zone of executing it. And it sounds a bit arrogant to say that, but I'm coming off the back of a conversation that I just had with the team. So the team brilliantly went away, looked at it, and came up with a plan. And we submitted that plan with the whole idea. We did some commercial research. We looked around and saw, is there anyone else doing this? There are people who do not dissimilar, but they don't approach it in the same way. So we went and pitched, and we got through to an exploration stage, which is the first one, which was basically going in to listen to the customer. And then we re-pitched it in, based on what they proposed to us. And then we went out into an accelerator and built out the proof of concept. I'm not going to say that was easy, because dealing with government's always a fascinating experience. Not in a negative way. They were very, very supportive. CivTech were very, very supportive. And China sponsor were very, very supportive. They did everything within their power. And we proved out what we said we would do. And so we're in the process now of following that contract up. I think we're in the final stages of getting that hopefully signed off, and we'll be building that project out. And in the meantime, that technology we've spun into probably another 4 other projects off the back of that, and then other CivTech projects. We're really, really pleased. I mean, it's a risk. It's a big risk, but that
it's paying off. And when you were talking about it, what struck me was you had the humility to understand that you might not have all the answers yourself. You were open to someone else's opinion. And we talk about, those being like vital leadership qualities now. But I think that one of the things that was present that, it's not always easy to achieve in an early stage company there was a level of psychological safety for someone to feel, I can tell Duncan that we're going in the wrong direction and we need to do something completely different. And, that's quite refreshing to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean I'll always agree, but, but people can feel free to say whatever they want to say. Yeah, we've had in the company we've had some proper frank discussions, and people said things, and it's not easy. I think one of the key learnings for me early on, the problem with startup, it can end up being a passion project. And the problem with passion projects, they're great in hobbies, but as a business, if I was really frank, the route we were going, I don't think we'd have been here. It was still, they're all, it's just, it's littered. I'm not saying we're a huge success yet. We're definitely head on the right way. But I think sometimes with our case, I think we'd got so blinkered. It was a good moment and somebody once said to me, you need to let go of your product, of your company. You need to just step away, because the problem with a startup is you get so passionate, it's your baby. And then somebody says something bad about it, you get defensive. And you start going, no, that's wrong, I'm right. And there's plenty of examples out there of people who've, there's so many examples of, wow, they spent 60 million letters and kept going and kept going. And eventually somebody saw it. So of course, you can find those examples, but you can find plenty of examples of companies who just went down the passion route, and then just went nowhere. There's some really great failures out there. The juicer machine that's basically, it was quicker to actually juice your own fruit than to actually just use the juicing machine.
Yeah.
And they got billions, they got millions of dollars in investment. And they're so passionate because the people were so passionate they were right. And I think there was a moment where I had to realize that I don't know everything. It's sometimes people will say, unfortunately, I know, so I don't think you can come across that. I do listen. You have to listen. And I think as a leader, sometimes you just have to make decisions and you have to stand by those decisions. But at least listen to the input from other people and value that input and be prepared to adjust your decision. Your decision fundamentally may be we're doing this anyway, but at least let people have the voice of disagreeing with you. And I think that's the fine line to tread between, and I'm not saying I get it right. It's when you're making a decision or when you actually need to listen and go, do you know what? I may be wrong here. And
yes,
I've got to back down here because, or I'm being startups requires a level of sort of, you see it, certainly studies show that so much focus and drive that sometimes you forget you're just driving over people. Yeah, you're so focused on the future. I'm going here, and you end up just trampling over people just going there. And that's quite, you've got to put yourself back and just think, oh, hang on a second, I've been a bit, I'm trying not to swear.
Yeah. So yeah,
it's quite
self.
Yeah, and I just think it's me. It's not me. I can't be that. I'd struggle to be that. I'm not that type of founder. I struggle with that even as a manager. The concept of just trampling over people to get somewhere that I need to get to is I just not me. I feel really bad. And I'd much rather be slightly less successful and actually think to yourself, do you know what? I'm not that person,
Yeah. I think we'd all be better if we took time to think, what do I want to be remembered for? And if we, revisited that a little bit more frequently.
Yeah. I mean, my kids are a great grounder in my life, in my household, I rank slightly below the birds and the bees in the in the garden. My kids regularly remind me how far down the pecking order I am. And, when you come back and you're stressed and frustrated, which boils over into anger, do you know what I mean? And you then, it's quite lonely. And then I come in, your boys said they're looking at you, and all they want is their dad to turn up, and be present with them. And they're excited to tell you stuff. And this is what their day's gone. Well, you have to make a decision what your point is in your life at that point. And I think I reached a point where I just thought, COVID helped a lot, actually. I just thought to myself, do you know what? That's more important, because the business is the business.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's
not as real.
It's not as real as I'm got these two human beings, and my actions and what I do will drive them for the rest of their lives. And so regardless, they're going to hit teenagers and not want to speak to me. So I've got this finite window of enjoyment. Then they'll become teenagers and disappear. And then they'll become adults and maybe talk to me again. But it's a great grounder about why you're doing things and letting go of stuff and trying to figure out what's important in your life. For me personally, that's what I found. It's just no judgment on anybody else and their choices. That's their choices. That's them. But for me personally, as a founder, I found that helped me, and it's helping me be more focused, is by switching off and being present for my children. That's my way of dealing with things. Other people have a million other ways. That's in a bit of working out.
That's some great advice. I think that it's really easy for people to, especially when things are tough or you're in a high pressure or high stakes situation, it's easy to forget about everything that's not work. And at the end of the day, it's not what you're left with. So
no.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But it's just stuff. It's really like we have this very interesting thing that at one moment, maybe I shouldn't be so candid because nobody ever wants to hear these things. But I remember I changed my car. So we had one car and a smaller car, cheaper car, part of this journey. And my boys keep reminding me, we loved that old car. It was fantastic. I said, yes.
Yeah.
The new one consumes less fuel and it's far nicer in that sense. But fundamentally, I just said, stuff, when if the company takes off and we get big, we'll go off and buy that nice car. That's fine. It's stuff. You can have it, you can use it, stuff. What's more important is the case.
That's so nice to hear. And I'm sure your kids will love listening to this.
They'll run off. They'll be like, it's not football or rugby, and they'll just wander off, or try and regale me some fact from Operation Ouch or something.
So back to data and deep tech.
Yes.
I've got you here. You're a total expert in this area. It would be fantastic to get your insights into some of the common pitfalls I see businesses falling into, or some of the challenges that seem to be coming up time and time again for companies. So I guess the first one is, like, what do you think are like the most obvious, most frequent mistakes that companies are making when it comes to data?
The single biggest obvious one is, we've got loads of data. Can you create something from it and do something with it? What? Fine. Give me some money. Give me your data, and I'll happily look around your data for a while, and then come up with some stuff that I found, and then you'll go, "Well, that's not what I was looking for," and that's what your data tells us. But so that's the common one. People start with the concept. I've got data. The other one I've heard is, I need artificial intelligence. I need data science. I need to be doing AI. And those both are the same thing. To answer what problem? What are you
Yes.
trying to answer? And that's those two of the things I hear. And the question back is, well, what are you trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, people don't know what they're trying to answer. What are you trying to answer? What is the business problem you're trying to answer? And what is the impact if you solve that problem to you?
Mm-hmm. So that's so interesting because that really resonates with me in my job in the common pitfalls I see people falling into, and that they quite often start a search or recruitment project without knowing what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And they'll come with this idea and you're like, wait a minute, what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals? And the first set of what's produced may not actually be like a measurable achievement, or a smart goal or anything like that. So that really resonates. I guess sometimes we just are trying to move too fast that we don't challenge our thinking enough.
Yeah. And also, recruitment's an interesting one. I need a salesperson. Well, great. Okay. So what sort of salesperson do you need? Well, someone who can sell, obviously. Well, do you need a key account manager? Because that's one type of
Mm-hmm.
selling. Do you need an account director? Because that's a different type. Do you want a new business development person? Do you want a telesalesperson? Because all of those are different skills and requires a slightly different psychology of a salesperson. Some
Totally.
people are brilliant at opening doors, getting the doors in, and what you pay them to is get the people in, and somebody will come in and close the deal. But
Mm-hmm.
you've got to look at and again, that's data, that's understanding what you're trying to solve from
Yeah.
and you may not even need the data to solve that problem. You think you do. The number of times I've been approached by or spoken to founders of startups who say, I need to do AI, because that's
Mm-hmm.
what they're hearing, because they go to lots of accelerator programs. Data is the new gold. If you don't have data, you're failing
Yeah.
as a business. And if you don't have AI, nobody's going to buy it. And you sit there and you go, cool, what data have you got at the moment? Where's your product? Well, I haven't built anything yet, but I need data, I need AI. So you've got no customers, you've got no data. What are you building? Get your product out, get some customers, figure out what they're asking, figure out what they're wanting, then come back. And when you got data, you can start doing some really cool
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. Because then at that point, we're answering questions that makes the user experience better, gives your customers
Mm-hmm.
what they want, and makes your business more effective and generates more revenue. But you won't just saying, I need to do AI is not enough, because somebody's told you data is the new gold. I was at fault originally before coming full circle to figure it out. You need to know what your problem is.
Yeah. And so data is out there all over the place, and AI, there's lots of tools. It is the ability to execute on it and the
Yes.
ability to leverage it, but knowing that you're doing that in a way that makes sense and actually
Yeah.
does something.
So I think that the steps, like the technology for most solutions is there or thereabouts. The biggest questions are taking that route. Yeah, it's what's my problem? What would be the impact to my business if I solved it? What sort of data do I need to solve that problem? Do I have that data? Because if you don't have it, you can't
Mm-hmm.
solve it. Is that data available? Can I get hold of that data? Can I get that data out of my system? Can I get that? Am I allowed to use that data? Because
Mm-hmm.
GDPR, am I actually allowed to use it? Because people say, oh, yeah, we want this. And you said, but you're not allowed to use it. We only saw today, an article the other day where Meta have been fined by the European Commission privacy about using personalized data to drive personalized adverts. Just because it's there doesn't mean you can use it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've said, well, this is the type of data I want, is the data there? Is it the right type of data? Because if you don't have the right type of data, you won't answer the question. So just because you've got lots of data, you can use it. When you marry those, what's my problem? How do I solve it? What's the data I need to solve the problem? Have I got data? Yes. Is it available? Yes. I get the data. Does it fit into my how I solve the data problem? And the answer will be yes or no, or perhaps, or partway there. So I need to get some more data. Once you're past those journey, you're then into a bit of a circle of just spinning around, just improving. I think from a perspective of dealing data, don't be prepared. Be prepared as well. It may surface things you may not want to see.
Yes. Like maybe no one who's working on your platform is logging into it, and you might need to tell them to do that to change the data.
Or there's a feature that you love and they don't like. You think you're doing well here, but you're not doing well there. Yeah. And then you'll find things. The great thing about it is you'll find things that you do extremely well with it, and it's a very, very positive, output. Also, I always feel that once you know something, you work it off again data so you can know how to improve it. Because shooting off into the dark is still going off into the dark. But I mean, knowing what you're addressing and dealing with helps you. So there was a great project, very early days we worked on as part of the data lab. I shan't reveal who, but we did a bit of exploration and discovered the data wasn't able to answer it. So there's a bit of a shock moment for them. They're like, oh, we didn't expect that. But actually, I saw the guy a few years later and he said, from that project, we changed how we collected data. So now, a few years later, they finally have the solution they were looking for. Because they actually were honest enough to stand up and go, gosh, that's not what we should be doing. We should be getting this. So they changed the methodology to get what they needed so they then could develop the solution that they wanted. Mm-hmm. So the whole data journey, it is a journey. It's, here's my question. This is how I'd solve it. Have I got data? Yes, I have. Is it the right sort? And iterate and keep building from that, because you won't solve it 100% in the first time. You'll have to do it over one or two times. And there's a great diagram on the internet which says how companies see their data and how their data actually is. And invariably, the data is over here, and it's a bit more messier than people think. But that's not a bad problem. If you raise you the right partner will help you solve that problem and organize. So yeah, I think fundamentally that drives what we like. I love that process of seeing this is the pitfalls. Don't approach data with saying, I've got data, I need to do AI. Because we did it, would solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. So that's fascinating, especially that even when data won't give you an answer, there's still something there that you can learn.
100%.
Yeah. Lots of, that in itself is an insight. So
the adoption of artificial intelligence and AI is inherently risk-based, and there was failure involved. So once you accept that and you're brave to take it on, it's an exciting journey to go on. If you keep in mind what you're trying to achieve, there may be some setbacks along the way, but it's exciting to go through that. And as an organization, if your organization could be on board with that, and there's the support to make that change, that's where the greatest gains can be had. Because then you're really making fundamental business changes. And you can see that in the largest performers in industry today, businesses today, are data driven. They have business problems. They use data to help solve their business problems. And I'm not just talking about financial data. Financial data, CEOs and boards have been looking at Excel spreadsheets since time immemorial, right? It's understanding the bigger picture and the context. That's what DeepMiner does. We do context. So it's understanding all of those things with your data. It's all great to look at the financial figures. If you don't understand what underlies all that financial figures to make you perform better, as a business, that's a bit harder.
Definitely. So When do you think organizations should be like creating or reassessing their data strategies?
Oh, it's a very good question. All the time. I think, I think any, I think it's good. It's a very good question. So, I think it depends on your scale, point in business cycle, where you're at, or what you're doing. I think you should always be looking at the data. How deep you look at that data, I think sometimes depends on your size. Small businesses, your it depends what you're doing. It depends. That's a great answer. That's what I was told in my MBA. It depends. If you have customers, you should be watching your data, what you're doing with them. The data strategy should be ongoing. Actually, that's my final answer. You should be looking at it all the time. I think it just depends on what you're trying to solve and what your data strategy actually is. I think as a data person within an organization, as a CEO, you should be making sure that you're not narrow-minded in your data. This is, I may be misremembering this, so I'm happy to be fact corrected. But if we remember rightly, Tesco's were the very first to start out with the club card and all that data, yeah? So that helped them scale enormously and enabled them to really pinpoint what we're buying. And there's lots of famous examples with Walmart and all that. So that data strategy worked well. Now, they didn't review their data strategy because what they missed was the change in shopping habits. And that change in shopping habits went to small convenience shops.
Yes.
I'm sure you remember that. And suddenly Tesco had all these Tesco extras and out of town, huge big box stores. But people started going more and more to Co-op, to the small local grocers to buy their food because life got busier. People didn't want to drive because the traffic was so bad. And people started going there. And I know you can see Tesco Express everywhere and all those, but they were latecomers to the game. They came in late and they missed that boat because they were still focused on their data strategy, which was down to your spend in a big box. And they hadn't looked on their data wider where they were going. But that's for a large corporation. A smaller organization with an app for its users, it's the same thing. What are my users doing? What are the trends that my users are doing? So your customer always, your perspective on your data always needs to look outside of the context. Binding back to what I said right at the very start, data does not live in isolation. Data lives in context. There's the moment you just look at your customer usage, but not looking at the customer trends and what's happening all around them, you'll always have that slightly narrow vertical view of what's going on.
So always looking at the context and then refining from there.
Context is critical. And that's what DeepMiner, I think we bring with our product is context. So we bring context to data. How do I look at my data contextually? How do I take my data set there and how does it contextually live with all the other data around it? So from our product, a business does not live in isolation. A business lives in an industry, a business lives in a community, a business lives in as an employee, a business lives, all around it as an educator. So just looking at a business on its own doesn't quite function because when you're looking at companies who large employers who shut down, you then lose the direct employees, but then you lose all the supply chain surrounding that. Yeah. So all the supply chain loses that business. And so when you're looking at that, and that's with our customers at a governmental level, you've got to take that into account because a business does not live in isolation. It lives in an ecosystem around it. And that's critical.
Yeah. And I think that it's really taken the supply chain disruption around following on from COVID and Brexit for people to really get that, across society, how everything is interconnected.
Well, controversially, there's still people who want to deny that there's any links between things, but there are massive links, um, uh, exporting this at the time. I don't know if this has changed. So again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy to be corrected. But at the time, do you know, for exporting shellfish to Europe, you have to have them cleaned to a certain specification. Yep. We do not
Yes.
have that capability in the UK to do that. So that has
Mm-hmm.
to go to a place just outside of Brussels. So when we exited the EU, that was not considered. And the
Yeah.
additional timescale at the borders is not considered. So when you've got perishable goods like shellfish trying to be exported to Brussels to be cleaned to a standard that allows them to be exported, that's a major blockage. Now, there's
Yeah.
several comments I saw on a forum once a year, but we don't need any of that fancy cleaning stuff. I said, well, quite frankly, I don't want to eat mussels and oysters and get food poisoning because
No.
there's a reason why you clean them. There is a hygiene reason. It's basic
Mm-hmm.
why we get clean. But because the way the logistics and supply chain was all interlinked, and lobster fishermen in Scotland is intrinsically linked. You can see where we go with
Yeah.
all those data points throughout his or her supply chain, and that's for pretty much every industry. And it's all interconnected. You can see.
Yes, and you can't deny context in a world where everything is connected. I mean, it's inevitable.
Context is key when looking at data and making decisions. What context am I making this decision in? And what context does everything live together? Because again, coming back to that very early on, if we're making just very narrow decisions, somebody's decision may be very narrow, but it's within that context of other things going on. We did a piece of work with a gas company way back when, and it didn't go much further. But it's the context of which you are making those decisions as opposed to the sole reason. And actually, they really made a good point. We were predicting an outage on something, and they said, great. But actually, that same piece of machinery could be brought down 4 points down the line by a valve that stops working. And that's the context in which this one thing lived in. Yes, there's a one thing that had a maintenance schedule, but it made no difference if the valve down line from it, 4 valves down, packed in, because that would stop working anyway. This could be operating to its fullest potential. Contextually, if that valve down there stops working, makes no difference if this is working brilliantly because the valve's gone. Again, it's context. Everything lives in a context.
So as leaders, we don't just need to brush up on how we leverage data, why we're using data, but really our understanding of the macro environment around us and then the frameworks we use to make those decisions, or we're never going to be able to leverage that context.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And that, somebody you get data out. Very good examples around, there's recently been some work around the Information Commission issued a thing around using facial recognition for emotion. Said you shouldn't be using it. You should not be using that because the data is poor, and you should not be trying to predict if someone's lying or something like that, because every human beings all react differently to something. So when I think, which is quite rare, I tend to look and stare around like that because I'm thinking. So if you read some psychology things, he's looking left, right, up, down, he's being dodgy. It's not, but it's just a natural reaction of mine. So I go quiet, which for many of the listeners will be quite nice. But that's my way of doing it. Now, if you took, the problem is with some of the data is it takes lots of averages, then builds in some bias, and then says, lying. But actually, it's not. Amazon did it as well. Context is important. This is a brilliant example of context. Amazon, this is what I love about Amazon. There's lots of stories about them because they try stuff and they fail and then they just bin it. So they tried an original version of employment software. I don't know if you've heard of this. So what they wanted to do was increase diversity of all types into their business. So They built an algorithm. Yep, fantastic. Isn't that noble? So they built an algorithm that said, what does success look like in our business? And then let's apply that to CVs coming in. So the problem is what they forgot, or what the developers forgot, is that success until that moment had been white and male, of a certain demographic, of a certain lifestyle. So they took context. So basically what they started doing is rejecting CVs that if you hadn't been to a certain type of university, didn't play golf, didn't do this, didn't do that, weren't like that. And what they really quickly discovered, and to their credit, they found this out very quickly and immediately pulled the software, is it was ditching more diverse people because it didn't meet the norm that they had. So they were trying to bring in diversity. And actually what it was doing was the bias of the machine was actually just reinforcing bias. Yeah. So they very, very quickly discovered this, very, 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 very quickly got rid of it and published that they did it. They were very open that they made a mistake.
Yeah.
Which is, they come in for lots of criticism, but I find them very open when they get things wrong. They're like, we get this wrong. Don't do what we did.
Yeah. Which is great because so many academics only share their successes. So many businesses only share their successes. It's something which you don't get the chance to learn from other people's failures. We keep them quiet internally in our businesses.
Yeah. And we've made mistakes as well. You can't. We had a good one. We were doing a piece of work. This was interesting. So we've got a sentiment analysis model. Where we can read text and understand the sentiment. So the original one we built was good, performed well. It's probably up there with some of the best. Not maybe the best, but up there with some of the best. But decent enough. And then we decided to revisit the project and do it a bit better, because we're dorky like that. So we like being very good. So we went away and just had another go at it. I'll never forget, we came back and one of the team members said, no, we're not performing well on this. I don't know why it is. Oh, gosh. So we have a presentation, we sit to it. And I said, so we're hitting 45% there. They went, yeah. I said, you're hitting 55% over there. They said, yes, combines whatever 55 plus 45 is 90 odd. I'll get shot down for my maths. Do you know what it was? We figured out that human beings have two emotions. So you could be disgusted and happy. So you could go, that's awful. That is too funny in one emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can be happy and sad. You can be crying for tears of joy. You could find something, you could be angry and disappointed. You can be angry and happy. Yeah. You can be, human beings are complex emotional beings. We have more than one emotion. And accidentally, we discovered that. And I hadn't really been paying attention to the project as much as I should have. And hadn't realized that, because we'd been busy, and this is an honest admission from me. And it wasn't until my co-founder rocked up and said, you really need to come and chat and, literally said, oi, stop being a wanny, come in, do your job, and let's have a look at this. So we had a look, and then I just looked at him and, gosh, we discovered that human beings are complex beings and have. So that's the model we've rolled out, because we now understand that we're complex beings. And that was almost by chance, because we couldn't solve the original project. We then looked at that, we were trying to fix it, and we suddenly realized that we're human beings. And that's what's exciting, because switching it around to look at things from a human being perspective.
So these two examples you've given are very interesting. So obviously you've got to, when you're using AI, you've got to watch that you don't fall into the pitfall of creating like a bias, a homogenous environment as well. Yep. And you're taking that bias out. But you also, there's so much more complexity to dimensions than, we realize your example there of human emotion. You feel multiple things simultaneously, and people tend to not always explore that. With all of this happening, what do you think's next for AI and innovation and in that space?
That's
because
really
it's more challenging, because you can apply things quite easily to yes, no solutions quite effectively.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we've heard the end of that. I think there's still um, a huge amount to be work to be done there. I think there's a large amount of work to be done there. I think as technology and computer systems get more and more embedded into everyday life, I think people are wanting to have, I think there's two routes. People are wanting to have a more human-like interaction with their artificial intelligence or with their products. So something's a bit more useful. I think voice is still going to be huge. Voice, with what Alexa's doing, coming up here in Aberdeen and doing really cool stuff with voice as well. Voice is really exciting, mainly because it's quite natural for us to speak at something and ask it to do things. I think there's still a large amount of development for there to be done. We work heavily in the field of natural language processing. I think it's, I'm going to say this, I think it's underrepresented because people don't quite click that we read a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff is written and read. So I think that's, furthermore, we see it, so we're heavily involved in high performance computing, more data, faster and faster and faster and faster. We work with AWS on this. I think that's a really exciting place. Trends, there's a multitude. I mean, the consumer ones I'm going to avoid because we're more techie based. I think things like edge computing. So when I say edge, obviously IoT. I think those are growing more and more powerful. With 5G, I've always maintained that 5G is a technology that really is such an enabler that, and you can do so much with a good 5G network on the edge with good edge processing. So that's a good one. I think that on a human level, I think it's going to go, there's two ways and maybe two tribes on a human level. We as humans have to be careful on the levels of intrusiveness of data. Okay, we're leaving bigger and bigger digital footprints. So actually, it depends where you want to go with that as a person. And I think there's product and regimes out there who are using technology in such an incredible way. It needs to be very uncomfortable with what they're using it for. And I think you have to be quite vigilant. And we as human beings and as the public can't sleepwalk into these scenarios, because what's possible to be done now is so incredible that you need to be aware as a consumer. And so it sounds slightly dark, but I view it from having a conversation with people who they say, can we have that? So yes, you can have that, but do you ethically want it? And I think ethical AI is one of the big trends coming up where we've got to watch that, as consumers. I build things in using artificial intelligence. So probably I watch it quite heavily. And there's areas that even I'm like a bit,
it's a bit close or creepy.
Yeah. And just even, we've got to be cautious. AI is great, but we've had this conversation with customers. We're not going to abdicate responsibility of making a decision to a computer. That's a very, there's a cultural reference as the computer says no. And people sit there, and the number of times we say, well, you go through, it's really convenient that I go online and do that. You're relying upon the algorithm being fair, inclusive, not making a judgment on you. When it says no, if it says no, it's no. But a human the human makes a value judgment around that. So if you end up pushing it too far the other way and adopting it wholesale to make all of your decisions, I think bias is the other trend to be aware of. Ethical AI and bias, you need to be aware. Now, I look at all the trends that are out there. Nobody's saying that, but that's my viewpoint. You just need to be a bit cautious.
We're going to need a lot more wisdom and leadership, and we're going to need to actually actively develop that.
Yeah, and there's some. We were lucky. We didn't. I'm not as certain about. In England, we're lucky in Scotland. We've got the great AI strategy guys and the work they're doing there and ethical AI. Um, I think that's really good. In Scotland, we've got a lot of work around how we process data and what we do with that data, which is excellent. I think the trends we'll continue to see it grow. I think we'll see more and more voice. Video is still very powerful. Video is absolutely, I think, one of the most powerful mediums out there. Quantum computing is going in great grounds when that comes in 5G. Some of it sounds similar, but I think there is so much more to come from these technologies that we haven't even scraped the barrel of. We're not even close to the bottom of what's possible.
Still a lot to do. So
there is still huge amounts to do. And even, Rebecca, I saw this amazing video the other day of Citroen have launched this electric vehicle. And it's absolutely brilliant. So we see all these really fancy, very, very expensive electric vehicles. And Citroen, whether you love the brand or not, have launched a concept car, which is for about £20,000. It's got a 300-mile vehicle, but they're using things like cardboard in the body parts. You can recycle the whole thing. And the trend of tech like that is accelerating. I think renewables and net zero, I think AI in conjunction with helping us drive that is where we'll see some real benefits in design of new products, design of new ways of dealing with things.
Definitely some realistic aspirations there, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And it's all doable. Just need to have the leadership to do it.
So, Duncan, my final question for you is, obviously you're a first-time CEO at the moment. Reflecting on the last few years, what advice would you give to somebody who is a first-time CEO?
Phew. Leave your product quite quickly. So as in, don't become that passionate thing where you're so bought into it that you can't see the wood for the trees. Really just be clear about it. Don't be, there is a pressure, whether it's perceived or not, I don't know, but a pressure to that everything's always good, right? Mm-hmm. Everything's doing well. Don't fall into that trap. Be honest with yourself. If you're struggling, reach out, talk to people, find the people you can talk to. Because what you want are people around you that are there when the times are good, but also willing to pitch in and help you when the times are bad. Willing to try and help out somehow. I think that's really important. That they're very valuable. I think I've been lucky. There's some people like that. I've been really, really at the moments when I've been sat on the phone, just like sat there going, I just don't know what to do. And your heart's sinking and you're sat there going, I don't know what to do. And they've said, right, okay, right. So let's just work through this logically, and that's really, really helpful. The other thing is have other passions outside of this work. Startup can eat into your life. Have another passion.
Yeah, keeping perspective seems to be a big theme.
It is. And that passion doesn't have to be anything related to startup, to business. I don't have time. Somebody's telling me, to read a lot about business. I don't have time. I've got 2 young children. So the reading I do is kids' books to my children. And actually, they give you so much insight. Just going back to what they're trying to teach children is quite incredible. Have other passions, I would say, that are not work-related. Yeah, they're not work-related. They could be anything, but that means that your mind steps away from business. So you have, even if it's half an hour a day, an hour a day, I work out because it actually makes me a lot better. Not because I like it, it just makes me better. But I have a passion for film and some cultures and stuff like that. And that's what I really enjoy. And it takes me away from work, binging sci-fi books or binging sci-fi series takes me away from work and makes me forget. That's really important. What's the other thing? I've heard a lot about imposter syndrome. You do belong doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You do belong. You've had the courage to start up a business. You have every right to walk into that room, be on that panel, do that, because you're already doing something which a lot of people don't have the courage to do.
Very true.
You've earned that right. I hear it all the time about imposter syndrome. No, you have the right. You've started. You are a startup founder. You founded of any type of business. You have something to bring to that journey. Do not be afraid of that, or be proud of that. Yeah.
So perspective, balance, resilience, and having like diverse interests as well as believing in yourself. And I guess having all of that stuff that's beyond the day-to-day life of a CEO at work will kind of help you to get that context. If you're just stuck in something, you're never going to see the big picture.
You see context. Exactly. There's a really interesting thing that has been said to me many, many times. When you do a startup in the US and you fail, everyone's like, oh, okay. Hey ho. Oh dear, what's your next one? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's in the UK, it's changing, but it's still an element of, oh, you failed. Oh, they didn't do that right. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Contextually, so what? They tried, it didn't work out. At least they gave it a go. At least somebody gave it a go, and they've learned probably a lot from it. So they're going to come back and try something different. And just, they got something good to give. And I think you've got to have context these days, in it, because also, the context is all about, it's just not life or death. This is a business.
Very true, and wise words. So, Duncan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating. We've covered so much. We've learned about your career, DeepMiner, data strategy, insights. We've discussed, a lot around decision making, which has been great. So I hope that it's enjoyable for everyone to listen to, as it has been having this conversation with you.
No, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it as well.
Thanks for listening to the Lucent Perspective. I'm Rebecca Hastings, founder and director at the Lucent Group, a tech sector executive search and talent consultancy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. If you're a company looking to hire top technology leaders, or you'd like to discuss your next move, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email to rebecca@thelucentgroup.co.uk. Thanks again for listening today.